Yuki's fingers trembled as she counted the coins for the third time, her exhausted eyes fixed on the milk carton, the kind with extra calcium that her 7-year-old daughter desperately needed. "I'm sorry," she whispered, sliding it back across the counter. "Just the rice and vegetables." This was her life now. A university graduate with dreams of becoming a teacher, reduced to choosing between her daughter's nutrition and next week's rent. Every night, the same impossible mathematics. Every morning, another failure. Outside, Tokyo's Shibuya district pulsed with neon life. Clubs, restaurants, designer stores, a world she could only observe through glass, like an exhibit she'd never be allowed to enter. She didn't know that across the street, hidden behind the tinted windows of a black Mercedes, someone was watching. Kazuki Takamura, Oyabun of the Takamura Gumi, one of Tokyo's most powerful Yakuza bosses. A man who'd survived 3 assassination attempts and commanded 300 men with absolute authority. A man who had no business caring about a struggling single mother. Yet for 3 weeks, he'd been watching her, night after night, drawn to something he couldn't name, the fierce way she protected her sick child, the kindness she showed strangers despite having nothing herself, the strength it took to keep going when the world had given her every reason to quit. Kazuki's eyes never left her figure as she disappeared into a dilapidated apartment building. "Drive slowly. I want to see which floor." He was not a man given to sentiment. In his world, weakness was death. Emotion was liability. He'd accepted the darkness of his life long ago, the blood on his hands, the violence, the moral compromises. But watching her struggle stirred something he thought he'd buried with his own mother 20 years ago. The memory of another woman who'd worked herself to exhaustion, who'd needed help that never came. What Kazuki didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that in exactly 4 hours, fate would force his hand. At 2:47 a.m., Yuki's daughter would stop breathing, and Kazuki Takamura would have to decide, remain in the shadows or step into the light and change 2 lives forever. This is their story, a tale of desperation and salvation, of darkness meeting light, of 2 broken people who found in each other something worth protecting. This is the weight of kindness. "Mama, I can't breathe." Yuki's 7-year-old daughter was dying, and she was 23 yen short of the medicine that could save her. This is how lives end in Tokyo, not with drama, but with mathematics, with coins counted 3 times because hoping changes reality, with mothers who've sold everything, worked 3 jobs, and still come up short. But Yuki Matsuda didn't know that someone had been watching her apartment for 3 weeks. Someone who was about to make her an offer that would save her life or destroy it. Kazuki Takamura was Yakuza, a man built from violence and blood who'd forgotten what kindness felt like until he saw a young mother carry her sick child through the rain at midnight, protecting her daughter like she was the only thing that mattered in the world. At 2:47 a.m., when Yuki's daughter stopped breathing, Kazuki made a choice. He stepped out of the shadows, and nothing would ever be the same. Because in Tokyo's underworld, protection comes with a price. Safety demands sacrifice. And sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can accept is salvation from a man who lives in darkness. The fluorescent lights of the convenience store cast harsh shadows across Yuki's tired face as she counted coins for the 3rd time, her fingers trembling slightly. 23 yen short, always short. She glanced at the milk carton, the kind fortified with extra calcium that 7-year-old Hina needed, and felt her chest tighten. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the clerk, sliding the carton back across the counter. "Just the rice and vegetables, please." The clerk, a kind elderly woman who'd seen Yuki's struggle play out night after night, pretended not to notice the tears gathering in the young mother's eyes. Outside, Tokyo's Shibuya district pulsed with neon life. Clubs, restaurants, designer stores, all existing in a world Yuki could only observe from the outside. Another day, another failure. She clutched the thin plastic bag and stepped into the October cold, her worn coat insufficient against the wind, cutting through the alley shortcut to her apartment. The fabric had been nice once, back when she'd been a university student with dreams of becoming a teacher, before Hina's father had disappeared, before her daughter had been diagnosed with a chronic respiratory condition requiring expensive medications, before Yuki's world had narrowed to a series of impossible choices between heating and food, medicine and rent. Across the street, obscured by the tinted windows of a black Mercedes S-Class, Kazuki Takamura watched her go. He'd been watching for 3 weeks now. It had started accidentally, a routine drive through the district he controlled, nothing more. Then he'd seen her, a young woman with gentle eyes and hunched shoulders, leaving the children's hospital at midnight with a small girl wrapped in her arms. Something about the careful way she'd carried the child, the fierce protection in her exhausted posture, had caught his attention in a way nothing had for years. Kazuki was not a man given to sentiment. As Oyabun of the Takamura Gumi, one of Tokyo's most powerful Yakuza families, he'd built his reputation on calculated decisions and iron control. At 36, he'd survived 3 assassination attempts, consolidated territories that had been warring for decades, and commanded the absolute loyalty of 300 men. Weakness was not permitted. Emotion was a liability. Yet here he was, night after night, watching a woman he'd never spoken to. Boss, his driver Kenji, spoke carefully. The meeting with the Yamaguchi representative starts in 20 minutes. Drive slowly, Kazuki replied, his eyes tracking Yuki's figure as she disappeared into a dilapidated apartment building. I want to see which floor. 4th floor. The light flickered on in a corner apartment, visible through thin curtains that did nothing to hide the modest space beyond. He could see her moving inside, removing her coat, checking on something in the other room. The child's room, he knew. The sick daughter she worked 3 jobs to support. His jaw tightened. Kazuki had long ago accepted the darkness of his world. He was not a hero. The Takamura Gumi controlled gambling, entertainment districts, and provided security services that operated in legal gray areas. He'd made peace with who he was, or rather, what he'd become after his father's murder 20 years ago had thrust him into this life. But watching Yuki struggle stirred something he'd thought dead. The memory of his own mother, working herself to exhaustion after his father's death, before the Yakuza life had claimed him entirely. Boss? Kenji prompted again. Go, Kazuki said finally, settling back into the leather seat. But his mind remained in that 4th floor apartment, wondering what kind of woman worked herself to collapse to save her child, yet still stopped to help an elderly neighbor carry groceries, despite her own exhaustion. Something he'd witnessed just 2 days ago. A fool, his practical mind supplied. Someone who doesn't understand how the world really works. But a different voice, one that sounded suspiciously like the 15-year-old boy he'd once been, whispered, someone worth protecting. Inside the apartment, Yuki finally allowed herself to cry. She did it quietly, efficiently in the bathroom with the water running so Hina wouldn't hear. 5 minutes of weakness, then she washed her face, straightened her spine, and returned to her daughter's bedside with a smile that had become her most practiced expression. Mama's back, sweetheart. Hina looked up from the picture book she'd been studying. A library loan, read so many times the pages were soft with wear. Her daughter's face, though pale and too thin, lit up with the kind of pure joy that made every sacrifice worthwhile. Did you bring the pudding? Hina asked hopefully. Yuki's heart cracked a little more. She'd promised pudding yesterday before realizing the prescription refill would cost more than budgeted. Tomorrow, she lied, smoothing Hina's dark hair. Tomorrow for sure. But look, I brought your favorite vegetables for dinner. Hina, blessedly young and trusting, accepted this with only a small, disappointed sigh. The ones you make with the sweet sauce? Exactly those. As Yuki prepared their modest dinner in the cramped kitchen, she tried not to think about the eviction notice hidden in her purse. 3 months behind on rent. The landlord had been patient, more patient than she'd had any right to expect. But patience had limits. 2 more weeks. She had 2 more weeks to come up with 180,000 yen, or she and Hina would be on the street. I'll figure something out, she told herself, the same lie she'd been telling for months. I always do. But the universe of solutions was shrinking. She'd already sold everything of value, already worked every hour the day contained, already borrowed from everyone who would lend. Her phone buzzed, a message from her manager at the cleaning company. Can you take the morning shift at the Roppongi office building? Yui called in sick. Extra 8,000 yen, 8,000 yen. A fortune, a drop in the ocean. Yes, she typed back. I'll be there. That meant no sleep tonight. The shift started at 4 a.m., ran until noon, then she had her afternoon job at the cafe, followed by evening inventory work at the warehouse. She'd have to ask Mrs. Tanaka next door to check on Hina during the morning, another favor from a neighbor already too generous with her time. I can rest when Hina is safe, she thought, checking on her daughter once more before settling in to prepare for the night ahead. I can rest when she's healthy and we have a home and she can just be a child, if that day ever came. Across the city, in a private room of an exclusive restaurant where politicians and power brokers came to make deals that would never appear in official records, Kazuki listened to the Yamaguchi Gumi representatives with half his attention. The other half remained in a 4th-floor apartment in Shibuya, where a woman who deserved better than this world was probably going to bed hungry so her child could eat. He'd done nothing to intervene so far, told himself it wasn't his business, that he was not a charity, not a savior, not the kind of man who involved himself in the problems of civilians. But as the meeting droned on, territorial agreements, profit-sharing arrangements, the tedious maintenance of peace between families, Kazuki found himself making a different kind of calculation. What would it cost to help her? Not much in the scope of his resources. A month's rent on that apartment was less than he spent on a single dinner. But the real question was darker. What would helping her cost her? His world destroyed things. Beautiful, gentle things especially. If he stepped into Yuki's life, he would inevitably drag shadows with him. His enemies would see her as leverage. His own organization would question his judgment. And she herself might look at him with the fear he saw in most civilians' eyes when they realized what he was. Better to stay away, to watch from a distance and do nothing, like you watched from a distance while your mother worked herself to death, that traitorous voice whispered. Kazuki's expression remained impassive, but his hand tightened around his whiskey glass until the crystal creaked. Takamura-san. One of the Yamaguchi representatives was watching him expectantly. Do we have your agreement on the Akasaka territory? You have my agreement, Kazuki said smoothly, his mind already made up on an entirely different matter. Kenji will work out the details with your people. The meeting concluded with the usual rituals, bows, carefully worded assurances, the performance of civility between men who would kill each other if the balance of power shifted sufficiently. Finally, blessedly, he was back in the Mercedes, the city sliding past in ribbons of light. Home, boss? Kenji asked. Kazuki looked at his watch. 11:47 p.m. She would be asleep by now, or perhaps lying awake, calculating impossible mathematics, trying to find solutions where none existed. The Shibuya apartment, he heard himself say. The one we've been observing. Kenji's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, surprise quickly masked. Yes, boss. They drove in silence. Kazuki didn't examine his decision too closely. He was acting on instinct, the same instinct that had kept him alive through 2 decades in this brutal world. Some things were worth protecting. Some people deserved better than the hand fate had dealt them. And if he was damned already, and he had no illusions about that, then perhaps he could use his particular form of damnation for something other than destruction. The Mercedes pulled up to the shabby apartment building. Kazuki stared up at the fourth-floor window, where a single light still burned. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he would speak to her. Tonight he would set certain wheels in motion. The landlord would discover an unexpected benefactor. The hospital would find their billing system had made an error in her favor. Small interventions, invisible strings pulled from the shadows. It wasn't much, but it would buy her time. And time, Kazuki knew better than most, was the most precious thing you could give someone who was drowning. Act 2. The Collision. The call came at 2:47 a.m. Yuki jolted awake, heart hammering, instantly reaching for her phone with the panic that all parents of sick children know intimately. Unknown number. Her first irrational thought, the hospital. Hello? Her voice cracked with fear. Is this Yuki Matsuda? A woman's voice, elderly and urgent. This is Mrs. Watanabe from the apartment next to you. I'm so sorry to call, but your daughter. I heard strange sounds through the wall, crying and then silence. I was worried. Yuki was already moving, phone trapped between shoulder and ear as she threw on clothes. What kind of sounds? Is she didn't finish. Didn't let herself finish. Hina's room was just beyond her own, and she burst through the door to find her daughter sitting up in bed, whimpering and clutching her chest. "Mama," Hina gasped. "Can't breathe." The phone clattered to the floor. Yuki's training, the first aid courses she'd taken after Hina's diagnosis, the emergency protocols drilled into her, kicked in even as terror threatened to overwhelm her. Nebulizer. Inhaler first, then nebulizer if no improvement. Call ambulance if no response in 10 minutes. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the inhaler twice. Hina's lips were tinged with blue. "It's okay, baby. It's okay. Mama's here," Yuki murmured, administering the medication with practiced efficiency that belied her inner panic. "Breathe with me. Slow. That's it. Good girl." The seconds stretched into eternities. Hina's breathing remained labored, the wheeze audible even without a stethoscope, not improving fast enough. Yuki reached for her phone to call emergency services, and that's when her door crashed open. She screamed, instinctively throwing herself between the intruder and Hina, until her mind caught up with her eyes and she registered what she was seeing. A tall man in an expensive dark suit, another man behind him, and an elderly woman, Mrs. Watanabe from next door, hovering in the doorway looking apologetic and frightened. "I'm sorry," Mrs. Watanabe stammered. "They heard me on the phone and just— Your daughter needs a hospital," the tall man said, his voice commanding but not unkind. "My car is outside. We can be at Tokyo Medical Center in 12 minutes. The ambulance will take 30, minimum." Yuki stared at him, mind struggling to process. She didn't know this man, didn't know why he was here, why he knew about ambulance response times, why he spoke with such absolute authority. But Hina wheezed again, and Yuki's maternal instincts overrode everything else. "Who are you?" she demanded, even as she gathered Hina into her arms. "Someone who can help," the man said simply. "Decide now. Every second matters." He was right. Yuki could see it in Hina's increasingly labored breathing, feel it in her daughter's racing heartbeat. "Fine," she said, brushing past him, "but if this is some kind of—" "It's not," he interrupted, already moving ahead to clear the path. "Kenji, call ahead to the hospital. I want Dr. Hayashi waiting in emergency." The other man was already on his phone, speaking in rapid, assured tones that suggested he was used to making demands that would be instantly obeyed. The next 12 minutes were a blur of leather seats and city lights streaking past at speeds that should have terrified Yuki, but instead felt like salvation. The tall man, still unnamed, sat beside her, his presence somehow both intimidating and reassuring. He didn't speak, didn't intrude, but his attention never wavered from Hina. "You're going to be fine," Yuki whispered to her daughter, rocking her gently. "Almost there, sweetheart. Almost there." "I know, Mama." Hina murmured, her breathing beginning to ease slightly, whether from the inhaler finally working or simply from her trust in her mother's words. "I'm not scared." Something flickered across the tall man's face. If Yuki had been less focused on her daughter, she might have recognized it as pain. Old, carefully buried pain. True to his word, they arrived at Tokyo Medical Center in under 12 minutes. And true to the other man's call, a doctor was indeed waiting with a wheelchair and a full team. "We've got her," Dr. Hayashi said kindly, taking Hina from Yuki's arms with practiced care. "You did everything right, Ms. Matsuda. The inhaler probably saved her life." Then Hina was being whisked away, and Yuki was left standing in the emergency room entrance, shaking with adrenaline crash and wearing mismatched clothes and suddenly, belatedly, aware that she'd gotten into a car with complete strangers in the middle of the night. She turned to find the tall man watching her, his expression unreadable. "Thank you," she said, because whatever else was true, he had helped her daughter. I don't understand what just happened, but thank you." "Sit," he said, gesturing to the waiting area. "You're about to collapse." "I'm fine," Yuki lied. "Sit," he repeated, and this time there was steel beneath the courtesy. "Your daughter is in good hands. Dr. Hayashi is the best pediatric pulmonologist in Tokyo. Now sit before you fall down." Yuki's legs chose that moment to give out, and she found herself sinking into one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs. The man, tall, perhaps mid-30s, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to see too much, sat across from her, maintaining a careful distance. "Who are you?" Yuki asked again, now that Hina was safe enough for her to process this impossibility. "Why were you watching my apartment?" "My name is Kazuki Takamura," he said. "And yes, I've been observing you for some time." The way he said it, matter of fact, unapologetic, sent chills down Yuki's spine. That's not normal. That's stalking." "Yes," he agreed, without a trace of shame. "Though my intentions were not what you're thinking." "Then what were they?" Yuki demanded, fear giving way to anger now that the immediate crisis had passed. "What kind of man watches a stranger's apartment in the middle of the night?" Kazuki regarded her for a long moment. "The kind who recognizes someone struggling alone and considers whether he has the power to change that." "I don't need charity," Yuki said reflexively, the words automatic after years of offers that came with strings attached. "Good," Kazuki replied, "because I'm not offering any." Yuki blinked, confused. "Then what are you offering?" "Protection," he said simply. "Assistance. Security for you and your daughter." In exchange for what? Because there was always an exchange. Yuki had learned that the hard way. Kazuki's expression shifted, something almost like respect entering his eyes. "You're smart to ask. In exchange for nothing, or rather, in exchange for allowing me to do this." "No one does something for nothing," Yuki said flatly, "especially not—" She paused, taking in his expensive suit, the commanding way he'd spoken to the hospital staff, the man named Kenji who hovered nearby like a bodyguard. "Especially not someone like you." "Someone like me," Kazuki repeated, and now there was dark amusement in his tone. "What do you think I am, Yuki Matsuda?" The use of her full name, which she hadn't given him, should have frightened her more than it did, but exhaustion and emotional overload had dulled her capacity for panic. "Yakuza," she said, the word falling between them like a stone. "You're Yakuza." Kazuki didn't deny it. "I am the Oyabun of the Takamura Gumi, and before you run, which is the smart thing to do, let me tell you something true. Your landlord has been paid for the next year. The hospital's billing department will discover an anonymous donor has covered Hina's outstanding charges and her future treatment, and there's an envelope at the reception desk with 500,000 yen in cash, no strings attached." Yuki's world tilted. "What? No, I can't. You can't." "It's already done," Kazuki said. I had my people set it in motion days ago. Tonight simply accelerated certain plans. Why? Yuki whispered, tears threatening again. Why would you do this? You don't know us. We're nothing to you. Kazuki was silent for so long that Yuki thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, rougher. My mother died when I was 16, he said. Worked herself to exhaustion trying to keep food on our table after my father was killed. I watched her fade, day by day, because she wouldn't accept help from anyone. Pride and fear. His eyes met Yuki's. I swore then that if I ever had the power to prevent someone else from suffering that way, I would. But you said, Yakuza. Yuki struggled to reconcile the man before her with the stories she'd heard about organized crime. I am, Kazuki confirmed. I won't lie to you about what I am. I've done things that would horrify you. I operate in a world of violence and power that you've probably never imagined. But that doesn't mean I can't choose to do something good when the opportunity presents itself. There has to be a catch, Yuki insisted, even as part of her desperately wanted to believe him. You said protection. Protection from what? Kazuki's jaw tightened. From whatever threatens you or your daughter, whether that's poverty, illness, or something more direct. My world is dangerous, but it also offers certain advantages. I can ensure you're safe, fed, housed, that Hina gets the best medical care, that you never have to count coins for milk again. The specificity of that detail, the milk which he couldn't possibly know about unless he'd been watching very closely indeed, should have terrified Yuki. Instead, she found herself fighting the urge to simply surrender to the relief his words offered. And in return, she pressed, in return, you accept my protection. You allow me to ensure your safety, and perhaps... Kazuki hesitated, showing uncertainty for the first time. Perhaps you allow me to know that someone in this city is living a better life because I chose to intervene. That's it? Yuki asked skeptically. You don't want... She couldn't quite voice the darker possibilities. I want nothing from you that you don't freely offer, Kazuki said, his voice sharp with something that might have been offense. I'm Yakuza, not a monster. You and your daughter will be protected and provided for. Your life will remain your own. The only thing that changes is that you'll no longer struggle alone. Yuki stared at him, at this impossible man making impossible offers. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous, that involving herself with organized crime, no matter how benevolent it seemed, was a path to destruction. But Hina was in a hospital bed right now because Yuki had been too poor to afford better preventive care, because she'd been forced to choose between medicine and food, between heating and rent. Ms. Matsuda. A nurse approached with a clipboard. Your daughter is stabilized. Dr. Hayashi would like to keep her for observation, but she's going to be fine. You can see her in a moment. Relief crashed over Yuki so powerfully she nearly sobbed. Thank you. Thank you so much. The nurse smiled, then glanced at Kazuki with an expression Yuki couldn't quite read, respect mixed with something like fear. Then she hurried away. Everyone here knows who you are, Yuki observed. Yes, Kazuki said. The Takamura Gumi has connections with this hospital. We ensure their funding in exchange for certain courtesies. That's how Dr. Hayashi was waiting, Yuki realized. You called ahead, and they couldn't refuse. I called ahead, and they understood the situation was critical, Kazuki corrected. Dr. Hayashi is a good man. He would have helped regardless. My influence simply ensured no bureaucratic delays. A doctor appeared in the doorway. Ms. Matsuda, you can come back now. Yuki stood, her body moving toward her daughter automatically, but she paused, looking back at Kazuki. I need to think about this, she said. Your offer. I need time. Take all the time you need, Kazuki replied, rising as well. The money, the rent, the medical care, those are already in place regardless of your decision. Consider them a gift, no strings attached." "There are always strings," Yuki said softly. "Then consider these strings I'm willing to cut." Kazuki countered. "Go to your daughter, Yuki. We'll talk later, when you've had rest and time to process." He turned to leave, Kenji materializing at his side. But Yuki called out, "Takamura-san?" He looked back, and for a moment the harsh hospital lighting caught his face at an angle that revealed the exhaustion beneath his composed exterior. He looked, Yuki thought, like someone who'd been fighting for a very long time. "Thank you," she said again, "for Hina. Whatever else happens, thank you for that." Something softened in Kazuki's expression. "She's brave, your daughter. When we were in the car, she told me she wasn't scared because you were there. That's the kind of trust that comes from a good mother." He paused. "You're doing better than you think, Yuki Matsuda." Then he was gone, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness, leaving Yuki standing in the fluorescent brightness of the emergency ward, wondering if the entire encounter had been some kind of fever dream. But the nurse was holding out paperwork, and somewhere behind those doors Hina was waiting, and Yuki's legs were still shaking from the adrenaline crash of the night's events. Reality. This was reality. A Yakuza boss had offered to change her life, and she had no idea whether accepting would save them or destroy them. But Hina is alive, she thought, moving toward her daughter's room. Tonight, that's enough. She could figure out the rest tomorrow. Act 3. The Reckoning. 3 days passed in a strange dream. Yuki returned to her apartment to find the eviction notice gone, replaced by a receipt marked, "Paid in full, next 12 months." The hospital discharged Hina with a treatment plan that would have cost a fortune, all covered by the mysterious donor. And when Yuki went to the reception desk, there was indeed an envelope, thick with bills she was afraid to count. Kazuki Takamura did not appear, did not call, did not press her for an answer. The absence should have been a relief. Instead, Yuki found herself looking over her shoulder, half expecting to see him in the shadows, half wanting to. On the 4th night, as she was putting Hina to bed, in an apartment that was properly heated for the first time in months, her daughter asked the question Yuki had been dreading. "Mama, who was that man? The one who helped us?" Yuki smoothed her daughter's hair, considering her answer carefully. "Someone kind who happened to be there when we needed help." "He had sad eyes," Hina observed with the uncanny insight of children, like he understood about being scared. Sad eyes. Yes, Yuki thought. That described Kazuki perfectly. Sad eyes in a hard face, offering impossible salvation. "Sleep now, sweetheart," Yuki said, avoiding the larger questions. "You need your rest." But that night, after Hina was asleep, Yuki sat in her small living room and counted the money in the envelope. Exactly 500,000 yen, more money than she'd ever held at once. Enough to change everything. She should return it. Should take Hina and disappear before she got any more entangled with a man who operated outside the law. Instead, she found herself pulling out her phone and staring at the contact information Kazuki had left on a business card tucked into the envelope. Simple. Just a name and number. Nothing to indicate who he was or what he did. Her thumb hovered over the call button. "What am I doing?" she asked herself. "This is insane." But Hina was breathing easily in the next room. The heat was on. The crushing weight of financial desperation had lifted for the first time in 2 years. Yuki made the call. He answered on the first ring. "Yuki." Just her name, but the way he said it, familiar, concerned, made her breath catch. "I need to see you," she said, "to talk properly, not in a hospital, not in an emergency, just talk." "Tomorrow," Kazuki said immediately. "There's a cafe in Ibasu. Quiet, private. I'll send you the address." "I have work. I'll cover your shifts," he interrupted. "Whatever jobs you'd miss, you'll lose nothing." "You can't just—" Yuki started, then laughed, the sound surprising her. "You can, can't you? That's what power means in your world." "Yes," Kazuki said simply. Is that what you want to talk about? Power? Among other things, Yuki admitted. I need to understand this. Understand you, before I make any decisions. Fair enough, Kazuki agreed. 2 p.m. tomorrow, and Yuki, bring Hina if you want. I'm not trying to separate you from your daughter. The thoughtfulness of that offer, recognizing that Yuki might not trust leaving Hina with anyone right now, made something in her chest tighten. I'll come alone, she said. Mrs. Tanaka can watch her for a few hours. Tomorrow, then. He hung up before Yuki could second-guess herself. She sat in the warm apartment holding the phone, wondering what version of her life she was choosing. And the cafe was exactly as promised. Quiet, discreet, the kind of place where powerful people met to have conversations they didn't want overheard. Kazuki was already there when Yuki arrived, sitting in a corner booth that gave him a view of the entire room. Kenji stood near the entrance, his presence making it clear that this meeting would not be interrupted. Kazuki stood as Yuki approached, a courtesy that seemed at odds with his reputation. Thank you for coming. I said I would, Yuki replied, sliding into the booth across from him. Up close, in better lighting than the hospital's harsh fluorescence, she could see the details she'd missed before. The fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the slight scar along his jaw, the expensive watch that probably cost more than her yearly salary. But also, the careful way he held himself, the controlled distance he maintained, as if afraid she might bolt. Coffee, he offered, or tea. They have excellent matcha. Tea, Yuki said. And answers. A ghost of a smile crossed Kazuki's face. Direct. I appreciate that. He ordered for both of them with the ease of someone accustomed to being obeyed, then turned his full attention to Yuki. It was, she discovered, an intense experience, being the focus of Kazuki Takamura's attention, like standing in a spotlight that revealed every hidden thought. Ask, he said simply. Yuki had prepared a list of questions, but now, faced with him, only one seemed to matter. Why me? Kazuki was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming once on the table before stilling. Truthfully? I don't entirely know. I saw you leaving the hospital with Hina that first night. The way you carried her, so carefully, like she was the most precious thing in the world. And I thought... He paused. I thought about my mother, how she carried me the same way, even when she was exhausted, how no one helped her when she needed it most. So I'm a substitute, Yuki asked, not unkindly. A way to resolve old guilt? Perhaps partly, Kazuki admitted, and Yuki respected him more for not denying it. But it's more than that. I've seen hundreds of people struggling in this city. I don't offer them all what I'm offering you. Then what makes me different? Kazuki held her gaze. You're kind, even when you have no reason to be. I watched you give your lunch to a homeless man when you probably hadn't eaten properly in days. Watched you help your elderly neighbor carry groceries when you could barely stand yourself. You're raising a brave, loving child despite circumstances that would break most people. He leaned forward slightly. The world is full of people who become hard when life is hard. You remained soft. That's rare, Yuki. Worth protecting. Yuki felt heat rise to her cheeks. You don't know me. Not really. A few weeks of watching. I know enough, Kazuki said quietly. And I'd like to know more, if you'll allow it. By putting me under your protection? Yuki asked. Making me a... what? A dependent? By ensuring you have the resources to build the life you want, Kazuki corrected. For yourself and Hina. You're intelligent, educated. You should be teaching, like you wanted, not cleaning offices at 4 a.m. You investigated me, Yuki realized, uncertain whether to be flattered or disturbed. I investigate everyone who enters my sphere, Kazuki said unapologetically. It's how I stay alive. But what I found wasn't ammunition. It was a tragedy. A woman who'd done everything right, who'd worked hard and played by the rules, and was being crushed anyway because the system failed her. The system fails lots of people, Yuki pointed out. You can't save everyone." "No," Kazuki agreed, "but I can save you." The words hung between them, weighted with implications Yuki wasn't ready to examine. "What would this actually look like?" she asked, forcing herself to be practical. "This protection arrangement." Kazuki seemed to relax slightly, as if grateful to move to concrete terms. "Your current apartment isn't safe enough. I'd move you to a better building, one I control, with security. Nothing ostentatious, just secure. You'd have a living stipend that covers food, clothing, necessities. Hina's medical care would be completely covered, and I'd help you go back to school if you want to finish your teaching certification." "In exchange for what?" Yuki pressed, because this level of support had to cost more than money. Kazuki's jaw tightened. "You keep asking that. What do you think I want, Yuki?" "I don't know," she admitted. "That's what scares me. Men don't usually offer this much without expecting something." "I'm not other men," Kazuki said, and there was steel in his voice now. "I'm not asking you to be my mistress or my possession. I'm not asking for your body or your servitude. What I want—" He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "What I want is to know that there's something good in my world, something pure that I helped preserve. Is that so hard to believe?" Yuki studied him, seeing the truth in his eyes even as logic screamed that this was impossible. "Why do I feel like there's something you're not telling me?" Kazuki's expression darkened. "Because there is. The truth that accepting my protection makes you visible to my enemies, that there are people who would hurt you to get to me, that your life will be safer in terms of money and resources, but more dangerous in ways you can't imagine." "Then why offer at all?" Yuki demanded. "Because I'm selfish," Kazuki said bluntly. "Because I've spent 20 years in this world, and I'm tired of everything I touch turning to ash. Because when I saw you with Hina, I thought, here's something beautiful, something worth protecting. And maybe if I protect it well enough, I can prove to myself that I'm not completely lost." The raw honesty of it stole Yuki's breath. This was not the polished Yakuza boss, but something underneath, someone who'd been fighting so long, he'd forgotten what peace looked like. "That's a lot of pressure to put on one person," Yuki said softly, "to be your redemption." "I know," Kazuki replied, "which is why I'll understand if you refuse. The money I've already given you. Keep it. The rent is paid. The medical bills are covered. Walk away and I'll ensure you're left alone. You owe me nothing." "And if I don't walk away?" Kazuki's eyes locked with hers. "Then you accept that your life is now connected to mine, that I will protect you with everything I have, that my enemies become your enemies, that the shadows of my world will always be at the edges of yours." He paused. "But also that you'll never worry about keeping your daughter fed and warm again, that you'll have the freedom to become who you were meant to be, that someone will be watching over you always." It was, Yuki realized, both a warning and a promise, the most honest offer anyone had ever made her. "I need to think," she said. "This is—" Her phone rang, Hina's ringtone. Yuki's blood froze. Hina knew not to call unless it was an emergency. She answered with shaking hands. "Mama?" Hina's voice was small, frightened. "There's a woman here. She says she's grandmother, but she's scaring me." Before Yuki could respond, another voice came on the line, older, sharp with venom Yuki recognized instantly. "So you can afford to ignore my calls, but not to answer for your daughter?" Akiko Matsuda, Hina's paternal grandmother, sounded as bitter as ever. "I'm here to collect what's mine, Yuki. That child has my son's blood. She belongs with family, not with a failure like you." Yuki was already standing, panic overriding everything else. "You stay away from her. You have no rights." "I have every right." Akiko cut her off. "My lawyers will be in touch. That apartment isn't fit for my grandchild, and your financial situation makes you an unfit mother. I should have taken her years ago." The call ended. Yuki stood frozen, her worst nightmare manifesting. Akiko Matsuda had disowned her son when he'd gotten Yuki pregnant and refused to marry her, had treated Hina as shameful evidence of her son's disgrace, hadn't contacted them once in 7 years, until now. Until somehow she'd learned about Yuki's situation and saw an opportunity to, what? Take Hina? Use her as leverage? Yuki, Kazuki's voice cut through her panic. He was standing now, Kenji already moving toward them. "What happened?" "My daughter," Yuki gasped. "Her grandmother. The woman is poisoned. She never wanted anything to do with us, but now—" "Where?" Kazuki demanded, his entire demeanor shifting to something cold and dangerous. "My apartment. She's with Mrs. Tanaka, but—" "Kenji, the car, now!" Kazuki's hand was on Yuki's back, guiding her toward the exit with controlled urgency. "How did this woman know where you live?" "I don't know," Yuki said, her mind racing. "We've been hidden for years. Unless—" Her stomach dropped. "Unless she hired someone to find us. She has money. Connections." "Not as many as I do," Kazuki said grimly, and Yuki heard the promise of violence beneath his calm. "No one threatens what's mine." The possessiveness should have alarmed her. Instead, Yuki felt something like relief as they burst out of the cafe into the waiting Mercedes. "Drive," Kazuki told Kenji, already on his phone. "Taka, I need you at the Shibuya address. Now, and bring Yoshi and Masa. We may have a situation." Then to Yuki. "Describe this woman, everything you know about her." Yuki did, her voice steadier now that they were moving. Kazuki listened, his expression growing darker with each detail. "She's threatening custody?" he asked when Yuki finished. "She's threatened it before, when Hina was born. But she had no grounds. Hina's father refused to acknowledge her. But if Akiko can prove I'm financially unstable, that the apartment is inadequate—" Yuki's voice cracked. "She could take her. She could actually take her." "No," Kazuki said, and the certainty in his voice was absolute. "She won't. I promise you, Yuki. Whatever happens, Hina stays with you." "You can't promise that," Yuki whispered. "Courts, laws—" "I operate in worlds where laws are negotiable," Kazuki said bluntly. "This woman, she lives in my city, uses resources I could cut off with a phone call. If she wants a fight, she'll lose." "I don't want her hurt," Yuki said quickly. "Despite everything, I don't—" "She won't be hurt," Kazuki assured her. "But she will be convinced that pursuing custody is the worst decision she could make. That's enough." They arrived at the apartment building in under 8 minutes. Kenji had driven with the same reckless speed as the hospital run. But this time, Yuki barely noticed. All her focus was on getting to Hina. She burst from the car and raced up the stairs, Kazuki close behind. The door to Mrs. Tanaka's apartment was ajar, voices raised inside. "A disgrace that my granddaughter is living in these conditions," Akiko was saying, her cultured voice dripping with contempt. "When I think of what my son would say—" "Your son abandoned her." That was Mrs. Tanaka, bless her. "He left Yuki when she was pregnant and never looked back. You have no right—" Yuki pushed through the door. "Get away from my daughter." The scene that greeted her was worse than she'd imagined. Akiko Matsuda, elegant and cold in a designer suit, standing over Hina, who was pressed against Mrs. Tanaka and crying silently. A man in a business suit, probably a lawyer, stood near the door with a briefcase. "Ah, Yuki," Akiko said, not even looking at her. "Finally. I was just explaining to Hina that she'll be coming to live with me. A proper home, with proper education and opportunities. Not this squalor." "She's not going anywhere," Yuki said, moving to gather Hina into her arms. Her daughter clung to her immediately, shaking. "I think you'll find that's not your decision," Akiko said coldly. "Mr. Saito here has already filed the preliminary paperwork. Given your documented financial instability, your history of—" "Stop talking." Kazuki's voice cut through the room like a blade. He'd entered behind Yuki, and now he moved to stand beside her. Not touching, but his presence was like a wall between them and Akiko. Akiko finally looked up, annoyance crossing her face. "And who are you? Another boyfriend? Really, Yuki, you never learn." "I'm Kazuki Takamura," he said quietly, "Oyabun of the Takamura Gumi, and you're in the process of making a very serious mistake." The room went dead silent. Mr. Saito, the lawyer, had gone pale. Even Akiko, who probably had no idea what a Yakuza boss was, seemed to sense the danger. "I don't care who you are," she said, but her voice wavered. "This is a family matter." "It became my matter the moment you threatened what's mine," Kazuki replied, and his tone was pleasant in a way that made Yuki's skin prickle. "Let me explain your situation, Akiko-san. You've hired an investigator, Tanaka Investigations, I believe, to find your granddaughter. That same firm handles several of my business's security contracts. They'll be happy to share exactly what you've been planning." "That's privileged," Mr. Sato started. "Nothing is privileged when I ask nicely," Kazuki interrupted. "But let's move past that. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to withdraw your custody filing. You're going to return to your life and forget that Haina exists, the way you've been doing very successfully for 7 years. And in exchange, I won't look into how your late husband made his fortune. I suspect there are some interesting tax irregularities that would fascinate the authorities." "You're threatening me," Akiko said, drawing herself up. "I'm offering you a way out," Kazuki corrected. "Before this becomes uglier than necessary. Yuki is under my protection now. That makes Hina under my protection. Attempting to take this child is the same as attacking my family. Do you understand what that means?" Akiko looked at Yuki, seeing her for perhaps the first time. "You sold yourself to a gangster. For what? Money?" "I saved myself and my daughter," Yuki said quietly, pulling Hina closer. "Because no one else would help. Not you, not your son, not anyone. So yes, I accepted help from someone who offered it freely. Someone who's been kinder in 3 days than you've been in 7 years. Something flickered in Akiko's expression. Maybe shame. Maybe just calculation. "If this is your choice, then you've made your bed. But don't come crying to me when his world destroys you." "I won't," Yuki said. "Just leave. And don't come back." For a moment, it seemed Akiko might argue further, but then Kazuki shifted his weight slightly, barely a movement but somehow full of menace, and she grabbed her purse. "Mr. Saito, we're leaving," she said stiffly. "Withdraw the paperwork. This is no longer worth my time." The lawyer practically fled, and Akiko followed, her heels clicking sharply on the stairs. The door closed behind them, and the apartment fell into stunned silence. Mrs. Tanaka was the first to move, touching Yuki's arm gently. "Are you all right, dear?" "I don't know," Yuki admitted. She looked at Kazuki, who had moved to the window to watch the street below, probably ensuring Akiko actually left. "Thank you," again. "I seem to be saying that a lot." "She won't come back," Kazuki said, not turning around. "I'll make sure of it, and I'll have my people monitor the custody filing to ensure it's truly withdrawn." "Mama?" Hina's small voice broke through. "I don't have to go with grandmother?" "No, baby," Yuki said, kneeling to her daughter's level. "You're staying right here with me, forever." "Because of him?" Hina looked at Kazuki with those 2 wise eyes. "The man with the sad face?" Kazuki turned then, and Yuki saw his expression soften as he looked at her daughter. "Yes," he said simply, "because of me. I promised your mother I'd protect you both. I don't break my promises." "Okay," Hina said with the easy acceptance of children. Then, proving she was truly Yuki's daughter, "Are you hungry? Mrs. Tanaka made cookies." Against all odds, Kazuki smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. "I would like a cookie very much." Hour later, After cookies and tea and Mrs. Tanaka's fussing, Yuki found herself alone with Kazuki on the building's small rooftop. Hina was asleep in Mrs. Tanaka's apartment, exhausted from the emotional upheaval. Tokyo sprawled around them, a sea of lights, hiding countless stories. "I have my answer," Yuki said quietly. "About your offer." Kazuki didn't look at her, his gaze fixed on the skyline. "And?" "Yes," Yuki said. "I accept your protection. For Hina and for me." Now he turned, and the relief in his eyes was unmistakable. "You're sure? After today, you understand what it means to be connected to my world." "Today is exactly why I'm sure," Yuki replied. "You came for us. Didn't hesitate. Didn't ask what was in it for you, just came. And you made us safe." "I'll always come," Kazuki said, and it sounded like a vow. "Whenever you need me, whatever threatens you, I'll be there." "Why?" Yuki asked, the question that had been hovering between them all day. "Really, why, Kazuki? And don't tell me it's just about your mother or seeing someone struggling. There are easier ways to do good if that's what you want." Kazuki was quiet for so long that Yuki thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was raw. "Because when I saw you that first night carrying Hina from the hospital, I felt something I thought I'd buried 20 years ago," he said. "Hope. That maybe in all the darkness and blood and violence of my world, there could still be something worth protecting. Something beautiful that I didn't destroy just by touching it." He finally met her eyes. "You and Hina, you're proof that goodness still exists. And if I can keep you safe, keep you in my world without breaking you, then maybe I'm not as lost as I fear." Yuki's throat tightened. "That's a lot of weight to put on two people." "I know," Kazuki said. "I'm not asking you to save me, Yuki. I'm too far gone for that. But maybe you can remind me what I'm fighting for. Give me something to protect that isn't built on fear and power." "And if we fail?" Yuki asked. "If your world does hurt us?" "It won't," Kazuki said with quiet certainty. "I won't let it. Whatever it costs me, whatever alliances I have to break or enemies I have to make, you and Hina will be safe. I swear it." Yuki believed him. Against all logic, all reason, she believed the man standing before her would move heaven and earth to keep that promise. "Then I guess we do this," she said, "whatever this is." "A new beginning," Kazuki offered, "for both of us." He held out his hand, not a romantic gesture, but something more serious, a pact, an alliance. The beginning of something neither of them fully understood yet. Yuki took his hand. His grip was warm, strong, steady. "Thank you," she said one more time, "for seeing us, for caring." "Thank you," Kazuki replied, "for letting me." They stood there on the rooftop, hands clasped, two broken people finding unexpected solace in each other's presence. Below them, Tokyo pulsed with life, the city that had nearly crushed Yuki and had made Kazuki into something dark. But up here, for this moment, there was only the night air and the promise of something better. "I should go check on Hina," Yuki said eventually, reluctantly withdrawing her hand. "I'll have my people start the moving arrangements tomorrow," Kazuki said, slipping back into practical mode. "Nothing rushed. You can take your time deciding what to bring, what to leave." "Will I see you?" Yuki asked, then blushed at how that sounded. "I mean, or is this just, you have people who handle things?" "You'll see me," Kazuki said, and there was warmth in his voice. "I'm not the kind of man who protects from a distance. I'll be there, perhaps more than you want." "I don't think that's possible," Yuki admitted, then blushed harder. "I should really go." "Yuki," Kazuki called as she reached the door. She turned back. "Your daughter. When she called me sad. She's not wrong, I am sad, have been for a very long time. But when I'm around you both, I remember what it felt like before." "Before what?" Yuki asked softly. "Before I became what I am," Kazuki said. "You and Hina, you make me remember the boy who wanted to be a teacher, who believed in goodness, who thought the world could be fair." "Maybe he's not as gone as you think," Yuki suggested. "Maybe," Kazuki agreed. "We'll see." Then he was gone, disappearing down the stairs with the silent grace of a man accustomed to moving through shadows. Yuki stood alone on the rooftop, her hand still warm from his grip, her mind full of impossible futures. She'd accepted protection from a Yakuza boss, had bound her life to a man who operated outside society's rules, should be terrified, should be regretting this decision already. Instead, she felt safer than she had in years. Is this what security feels like, she wondered? Knowing someone powerful is watching over you? Or was it something else entirely? Something deeper, more dangerous, that had sparked the moment Kazuki Takamura had walked into her apartment at 3 a.m. and offered salvation. Yuki didn't have answers, but as she descended the stairs to collect her sleeping daughter, she found she wasn't afraid of the questions anymore. They had time, they had protection, and they had each other. This strange alliance forged in emergency rooms and midnight calls. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And somehow, that was enough. Epilogue. 6 months later, Yuki stood in the kitchen of their new apartment, spacious, secure, in a building where everyone knew not to ask questions, and watched Hina laugh over homework with a private tutor Kazuki had insisted on hiring. Her daughter was healthier, happier. The constant wheeze in her breathing had diminished with proper medication and care. She had friends now from the good school Kazuki had enrolled her in, had clothes that fit, toys she'd only dreamed of, a future that looked brighter than anything Yuki had dared hope for. And Kazuki came by 3 times a week, sometimes more, always careful, always respectful, maintaining the boundaries he'd promised. But somewhere along the way, those visits had become the moments Yuki looked forward to most. His presence in their lives had shifted from guardian to something warmer, more personal. He read to Hina, discussed literature with Yuki as she finished her teaching certification online, shared meals that felt almost like family, if family could include a Yakuza boss who still had blood on his hands but managed to keep it away from them. The shadows were still there. Yuki wasn't naive enough to think otherwise. Sometimes Kazuki arrived with fresh bruises. Sometimes Kenji's expression was darker than usual. The underworld hadn't disappeared just because Yuki chose not to see it. But Kazuki had kept his promise. Their life remained theirs, clean, safe, separate from his world's violence, even as they benefited from its protection. "Mama," Hina called out, "Kazuki-san is here." Yuki's heart did that traitorous skip it always did when she heard his name. She'd tried not to analyze what that meant, tried to maintain the careful distance of gratitude rather than something deeper. But when Kazuki walked into the kitchen, his stern face softening the way it only did for them, Yuki had to admit the truth. Somewhere between the emergency room and the rooftop and the countless quiet evenings since, gratitude had become something else entirely. "You're early," she said, trying for casual and probably failing. "I wanted to see you," Kazuki replied, equally casual, equally transparent. "Both of you. Is that all right?" "Always," Yuki heard herself say. Their eyes met, and in that moment Yuki saw the future unfold. Not the one she'd dreamed of as a university student, not the perfect storybook ending, but something real, something forged from desperation and unexpected kindness, and 2 broken people who'd found wholeness in each other. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you," Kazuki said, his voice careful. "When you're ready. No pressure." "Ask now," Yuki said, because after 6 months of this careful dance, she was ready for the next step, whatever that was. Kazuki glanced at Hina, still absorbed in her studies, then back to Yuki. "I'd like to take you to dinner. Just you. A proper date, not just me visiting, if you'd want that." It should have been a simple question, but Yuki understood what it really meant. the acknowledgement that this had become more than protection, more than gratitude, that they'd both been feeling this pull, this growing connection that had nothing to do with obligation and everything to do with choice. "I'd like that very much," Yuki said softly. "I'd like that very much." Kazuki's smile, rare, genuine, transformative, made her breath catch. "Saturday, then," he said. "I'll arrange everything." "Nothing too fancy," Yuki warned. "I'm still getting used to all this." "Just fancy enough," Kazuki promised. "Trust me." And that was the question, really. Did she trust him? This man who'd emerged from shadows to save her, who'd kept every promise, who looked at her daughter with such gentle care despite the violence in his world? "Yes," Yuki said, and meant it with everything she was. "I trust you." Outside, Tokyo hummed with its endless energy. Somewhere in the city, Kazuki's world continued. The meetings, the power plays, the darkness he navigated daily. But here, in this apartment he'd provided, in this life he'd made possible, there was light. And as Kazuki joined Hina at the table to help with homework, as Yuki watched them together and felt something dangerous and wonderful blooming in her chest, she thought, this is what saved looks like. Not perfect, not clean, but real. She'd been drowning and he'd pulled her out. In the process, maybe she'd saved him too, reminded him what he was protecting, why it mattered. They were still figuring out what they were to each other, but they had time now, time to explore, to build, to see where this unexpected connection might lead. And for the first time in years, Yuki found herself looking forward to the future instead of dreading it. That, she thought, was the greatest gift of all.